Well, we end today's program on a hopeful note. Are the banks finally taking it on the chin? Former Philadelphia 76ers owner Pat Croce just won a $2 million arbitration award. Pennies in the scheme of things, but he won it against the Swiss bank UBS, specifically for selling him faulty financial products tied to bankrupt investment bank Lehman Brothers. Now, you might think that a former 76ers owner doesn't need an extra $2 million. This guy's kind of a big shot as it is. But the award is significant because it's part of an increasing trend of legal rulings from judges that banks have been violating their duties to customers when they fail to disclose information about the products and services they are selling or to do due diligence to even know themselves. The charges included breach of fiduciary duty along with a string of others, and with us now is Jake Zemansky, the lawyer who beat the bank and not only got his client's money back, but was able to do so by attaching responsibility to the big banks. And, Jake, it's a pleasure to welcome you back.
Thank you.
Is this as hopeful as it appears? And tell us why, if it is hopeful, why is it hopeful?
I think we're seeing a trend both in courts and in arbitration panels giving money back to investors where banks have acted improperly. They failed to disclose material information. In the case with UBS, they lied about what they knew about Lehman, that it was a sinking ship, and sold it. Other banks, Merrill Lynch, Countrywide, are being hit by the courts. It's a good thing for investors.
Is this a sign that while the federal government and the Treasury might not be there to defend the American people from the banking system, that the judges on the bench may be?
Yeah, the judges are open-minded. They look at the law. They see that banks lied about what they knew about subprime exposure. We're seeing it in Citigroup, in the Merrill Lynch case. Just yesterday with J.P. Morgan, $156 million giving back to investors. So I think we're seeing a trend. The pendulum is swinging in favor of investors against the banks.
And how do you add to that momentum? How do we create an environment that really starts to move us toward not only holding the banks responsible, but also supporting the judges that have the open mind that you talk about?
Well, the only thing that gets to these banks is when they get hit in their pocketbook. We actually just won a case, got a judge to issue an order that mortgage companies who negligently issue loans can be held responsible.
What does that mean?
That means that if a mortgage company sloppily gave money to an elderly person or somebody that couldn't pay the mortgage, in this case the money was stolen by a guy that was running a Ponzi scheme, they're going to be held responsible for giving shoddy due diligence in making those loans. So we're starting to see cracks in the wall of the bank's liability. They're going to be held responsible in courts. The judges, one opinion adds on to another. So we're seeing a body of law that investors, if they were lied to, banks, if they were negligent, are going to be held responsible.
And so at this point, and it's not that this is truly nickels and dimes, but in the scheme of the amount of money that we're dealing with, a few $1 million here and a few $1 million there in a multi-trillion-dollar housing finance system and housing finance scheme is nickels and dimes. At what point do we see this type of precedent and liability attached to larger scale asset distributions like the placing of American housing debt at the Federal Reserve or at Fannie and Mae or at Freddie Mac when those loans were not compliant with the standards that they were purported to be adhering to?
Well, it starts in one case. This mortgage case, which we're going to be hearing more about, is an important case that's going to be cited by other courts in other cases. Countrywide is going to have to pay $700 million back to investors in a settlement that they agreed to. We could be talking hundreds of millions of dollars in each of these cases. That'll have a rippling effect and maybe a deterrent to banks committing fraud.
Does it open up any gateway for either the attorneys general on the public prosecution or anybody else as we look at the American deficit, as we look at the macro problems, so many of which are directly tied to housing finance and the transfer of all that debt in 2008 to the U.S. government from the banking sector? Well,
the problem is this. The taxpayers bailed out all of the major banks. Wall Street got a bailout. They've done very well. But the average guy, it was a hit and run. He's laying on the side of the road. He's His house is underwater. He's lost his life savings as the stocks collapse. We're beginning to see some restitution made to those investors, and I think the attorney generals, particularly the states, are going to get involved and make sure that some of that money is given back to the people where they've been taken advantage of in the mortgage area, in the securities area. So I do see a lot of hope coming up.
And you feel that time is the friend of justice?
I think it's working in favor of investors and borrowers.
All right, listen, Jake, it's a pleasure. Congrats on your victories. Jake
Thank you.
Szymanski.